So welcome everyone. Thanks for spending your Saturday morning with us. I will try and I'll keep it within an hour. That's my allotted time, so I will not go over that. I'll probably talk for about 45 minutes, and then we can answer questions and answers after that. So a little bit about me. My name is Mike Panicello. I'm the MUFON Connecticut State Director. MUFON stands for the Mutual UFO Network. The organization is a national organization. Actually, it's an international organization. We've been around since 1969. We have a chapter in every state, and we have chapters overseas in France, England, Australia, Canada, and we're expanding even further out as we speak. We are basically investigators. That's our primary responsibility. Is if you see something in the sky and you want to report it, you can report it to us. We have a national database that we keep. It's called the CMS. It's a case management system is its name. And from there, our field investigators who are trained will go out and try and figure out exactly what you saw, or do the best of our ability, try and figure out what you saw. We also provide public outreach and educational topics on ufology. We meet the first Saturday of every month, and we meet at, well, we used to meet up in Windsor Locks, but now with the pandemic, we meet on Zoom, and it's free. So if any of you are interested in coming in and seeing that meeting on Zoom, just go to our website. It's mufonct.com, or just Google us, MUFON Connecticut, and you can learn about it. So that's a little bit about who we are and what we do. We also run a ham radio net. So for those of you that are ham radio operators, every Tuesday I run a net, and you can join in if you have a ham license. We do sky watches, and we do other events, lectures like this. We're pretty active. And it's a great organization. We have a lot of great people. So that's who we are. Check us out. What I'm going to talk to you guys today about is how we investigate UFO sightings. And the reason this lecture came about is because often I get questions, well, how do you investigate sightings? And I said, well, we do it in a very scientific method. We do it we approach it as a scientist. We approach it looking for evidence, physical evidence or documented evidence. Often when people think of ufologists, they think of the people with the tinfoil hats on their heads, the ones that, the people that will say, oh, that's a UFO. And then you ask them, well, why is it a UFO? Well, they're like, well, because it is, or because I feel it, or because I know it, or because they talk to me, or something like that. And that's all great and fine. But when you're trying to convince a skeptic, or if you're trying to put credible evidence out there that, you know, what's out there is a real, true UFO, and a UFO stands for unidentified flying object. We'll get into the terminology in just a few minutes. It doesn't really work. People don't take that seriously. And most people that are of a skeptical nature or academic in nature, are not our target audience, but those that we're trying to convince that, you know, this is what we're investigating and this is why we think it is a UFO, they don't buy that. And that makes sense. I wouldn't either. So you have to have evidence. You have to have a methodology. And that's what we do here in Connecticut. And that's what I'm going to talk a little bit about, just the highlights of how we investigate sightings. And then if you want to go away, if you want to learn a little bit more about that, talk to me. We can set something up and you can become investigators yourself. It's a very easy process. Okay, so let's go into some quick terminology. UFO, well, what is it? Well, popular culture has defined UFO as unidentified flying object, aliens. That's not really what it means. All UFO means is that it's unidentified. And it could be unidentified for a number of reasons. It could be unidentified because there's not enough information to determine what it is. It could be a man-made object. It could be an aircraft. It could be a commercial airline flying at 38,000 feet. But for whatever reasons, there's not enough information to determine what that is. So it's considered an unknown, a UFO. Some of the more popular terminology now is UAP, unknown aerial phenomenon. It's more the modern vogue way of saying it because it takes away the stigma of UFOs, but even that's getting perverted into the stigma of it's aliens. And that's not, again, that's not really the case. So when we investigate sightings, we look for what is a man-made object, what are the man-made objects, and then we try and eliminate that. And then if we eliminate all those and we still can't figure out what it is, we call it an unknown, a UFO. And that's what we're talking about in Connecticut. What I tell all of my field investigators is that 90% of the stuff in the sky is man-made, aircraft, or they're natural phenomena. So they're aircraft, helicopters, balloons, blimps, quadcopters, drones, toy drones and government drones, commercial drones. Then you have the natural phenomenons like, shooting stars, just stars in the sky. Planets are sometimes misidentified as space stations. I forgot satellites are often misidentified as UFOs. And then of that 90%, you have 10%. And then of that 10%, maybe 8% is classified military projects. And that number actually might be a little bit higher. It might be something along the lines of 10% or 12%. But things like the U-2 spy plane, for example, when that first flew in the 1950s, the government were getting UFO reports from pilots at an exponential number. It kept going up and up and up. It's so much so that because the U-2 was classified and was run by the CIA initially, before it eventually went to the Air Force, the CIA started investigating this because they were concerned that they might actually out the U-2 spy plane. And then when declassified documents came around in the 90s, you have these documents from the government saying, well, that was a U-2 spy plane. So there is precedent for this. The SR-74 Blackbird, the SR-71, the F-117, all of those have been misidentified as UFOs until they were declassified and people saw it as what it truly was. It was a man-made object. So that's maybe that 8%. So the 2% that's out there could truly be unknown of extraterrestrial origins, zigzag pattern aircraft, non-traditional flight movements is how I like to look at what could be a true extraterrestrial craft. Okay, so that's some of the terminology. Let's go into how we investigate. So the first thing is it all starts with a case. You have to report a case. On your screen here where it has ads pizza, that's our homepage. That's what I was telling you guys about earlier. So if you want to learn more about us or you want to report a sighting, go to our website, just type in Google MUFON Connecticut, there's our website there. Or you can go to MUFON's main page and click on MUFON.com and report your sighting. Once you enter your report, this is the flow chart. First, the witness makes a report. Then it is assigned by the state director. So I will get that report and I will assign it to a field investigator. If you report an abduction, which you certainly can, and we encourage you to, we like all reports because the more documentation we have, the more data points we have, we can start seeing clusters and we can see where flaps are. Flaps are a series of multiple cases in one area. That will go to what's called the abduction and team interviews witness, ERT. There's an abduction team, they're specialized in it, they're psychiatrists, they're scientists, they work with the mind on their day jobs, so they know they're better equipped to handle abduction cases. A field investigator will also investigate it, they'll be the boots on the ground. And then if it's a really serious case, like a really interesting case, it will go to the trace evidence team or the STAR team. The STAR team is like the elite investigators. And if you are wanting to be that, you'll just join, you'll do a number of investigations. If you qualify, you apply, you qualify, you meet certain criteria, you become a STAR team member. That's kind of like if a UFO crashes in your backyard, you would be the one that would go as a STAR team investigator, hopefully before the government gets there, but chances are probably not. Then they will complete the investigation. They'll come up with a disposition. They'll be reviewed by the state director. If I don't agree with it, I'll send it back for more investigations. If I agree with it, we close the case. Now, that's a misnomer. Cases are never closed. We close them, officially close them to move on, but we can always reopen them if new evidence becomes prevalent. So what's the first step of a good investigation? How do we go about doing it? And how should you, if you want to go do this on your own, which you shouldn't, you should really do it with a group. But if you want to know how we do it, the first is to get the lay of the land. And you go to Google Earth. It's the best way to do it before, especially now with the pandemic. You may be a little worried about going out, or if it's a high cluster area now, some of the towns getting a little high on the numbers. Go to Google Earth. Now, this PowerPoint, I should say, was created and designed before the pandemic started. Now that the pandemic's going, please use, I'm not saying go out and investigate stuff. I'm telling you how we investigate stuff. So use your own, don't do something that's going to put yourself in danger. This is how we investigate. And I'm not teaching you how to investigate. I'm telling you how we investigate. So we get the lay of the land. We look at what's in the area. What are the landmarks? What are the features? Is it an urban city? Is it a suburban city? Is it a rural area like wooded? All of that's important because by knowing what's around you, you can see if there's other potential witnesses. Plus, if it was an object that was big enough, others will see it. For example, I did a case once in West Hartford, and if any of you been to West Hartford, it's an extremely densely populated area. And the witness said, I saw a craft that was the size of a football field over my house. Well, a football field-sized craft in West Hartford would be huge. And unless it was somehow out of the norm, out of some kind of space-time where only he could see it, no one else saw it. And we looked. There was no news coverage of it. There was nothing of that kind of information to see, to justify that there was something of a football-sized craft in West Hartford. Now, if that happened in the woods of Litchfield County, okay, maybe, it's a very rural area at night, but even that is there's people around. So get the lay of the land. That's the first thing we do. The most important thing that we do is we interview the witness. And there's interviewing techniques. You always start with an initial interview. You do not treat the person as a criminal suspect. You interview them with calm and relaxed and a non-distracted environment. Always in public, preferably in public, but we always say always. And always we bring someone with us for safety purposes. We never do this on our own because it's just a dangerous world out there. And now with the pandemic, we don't even meet people in person. We do it through Zoom. We do it through telephone, through FaceTime, through Google Chat, because you just don't know anymore. So this is how we do it. And we teach our investigators how to ask proper questions, how to ask non-leading questions, how to obtain questions without being in an accusatory manner. We try to be as impartial as possible. We just want the facts. So that's what we do. Then we start looking for possible conclusions. Okay, we talk to the witness, and we talk to the witness not just one time, but multiple times. If there's two of us, each of us will interview the witness separately, and then we'll talk together, the two investigators, compare notes, and then we'll interview the witnesses again. And the reason we interview them separately is people tell different stories in different manners. And if you're lying, you can't keep the story straight. So when one story is told to one investigator and a different story is told to the other investigator, and the investigators compare notes, look at it. That raises some red flags. So we try to find out what's going on. Is it a plane? Well, there's a lot of things out there we can use to find out what the planes are. Flight Radar 24, planefinder.net. There are some other ones. ABS Exchange is non-filtered data. Flight Radar 24 planefinder, excuse me, .net. The problem with these two websites is that they filter military aircraft and they filter some commercial aircraft. So you could have a plane over your head, but it will not show up on the website, the plane tracking website, because they're being blocked by the server. That's not going to help us. So how do we fix that? Well, we put in a FFA, Freedom of Information request to the FFA, and we pull the radar data. And we've done this before. In fact, there's a very famous case that one of my fellow members, who is a state director in Delaware, talks about, where they pulled the radar data of a plane that turned left on almost a commercial plane that like turned left really quickly out of something, out of the way of something. And then when you got the flight recordings from the tower, and you can get that off the internet, or you can get that through the FFA through a Freedom of Information request, confirmed that the plane was avoiding something. They said, well, there's something unknown up here. Well, they wouldn't have had the evidence for that unless they did a Freedom of Information request. So that's some ways around this blocking of craft on these commercial servers. Is it something natural? Was it a meteor? We look at the American Meteor Society. They have a fireball log where people can go and report fireballs, which are shooting stars. Is it a satellite? Heavens Above is a free software. It's great for sky watchers. If any of you are astronomy fans and you want to go out at night and you look at the night sky, I would strongly suggest going to Heavens Above, put up your address, the time, and the date, and it'll list all of the satellites that are going to pass overhead at that time. And you can go out at night with some binoculars and track them. There's also a lot of apps on your iPhone and your Google phone that will also do the same thing. Again, some drawbacks to that is classified military satellites are sometimes not listed on there, but there are ways around that, which I won't go into it now, but as a field investigator, we will teach you. And the only reason I'm not going into it is time-wise. I want to get done in time to answer questions that any of you may have. The most important thing is checking the local news. As I mentioned to you earlier, with that case I did in West Hartford, we looked at the news. Well, did anyone report to Channel 3, NBC, ABC, that there was a football-sized craft in West Hartford? No. Okay, well, why? Let's figure that out. One case I did, someone saw a orange orb in Plainville. Well, I checked the local news, and at that same weekend was the Plainville Hot Air Balloon Festival. So I contacted the organizers of that festival, and I asked them, hey, you guys launching sky lanterns that day? The answer was yes. The wind, the direction of the wind was going in the same direction as where that person's house was, and that's what it was. The description of the object, the way it disappeared, the direction it was moving from was the same, that the wind was going to push something. The fact that they were launching sky lanterns at the same time, all matches. Check with local officials, police and fire. It is okay to call the police and say, hey, and I've done this before. I say, I'm a UFO investigator. I work for MUFON. I'm an investigator. I want to know if anyone reported an unknown sighting, a UFO that at this time and date. Sometimes they'll help you, sometimes they won't. But I've always had great interaction with the police and the fire. They've always been extremely helpful and very respectful, and they do take their due diligence, and they'll check their log, and sometimes they'll put me on hold. A few times they'll say, well, let me call you back, and they call me back and they say no or yes, we've had a report. So town and local officials have always been great, and the police and fire have always been supportive of us. And we do that because, what's the one thing you do? When you don't know something and you think something's dangerous, you call the police, or maybe the fire department. And so that's why we check. And like I said, we have good relationships with them. They're very helpful. They're very kind to us, and they do answer our questions. We check the weather and video and photographic evidence. I can't stress this enough. if you're going to report something, if you have the ability, everyone has smartphones. I mean, almost everyone, I should say, has smartphones. Take a picture. But when you take a picture, please calm yourself, because when you're excited and you're moving around like this, you get a blurry photo. Also, most cameras, especially on the iPhone, because that's what I have, and I'm sure it's the same with the Android, they autofocus. And you have to let the film autofocus and focus in and then take your picture. Because if you just click away and you get a blurry photo, that's not going to do anything. We can't figure out what an object is in a blurry photo. The pixelated or pixelated and we're done. We also check the metadata on photos. And we have very good software. We have a software program that's about $5,000. It's a photo forensics thing that the police and the FBI use. And this thing can tell us a lot, this program. So we have the photography equipment to do photo analysis. So send a photo, take the time, get a good frame of reference. I know you're excited, but take a photo or a video. Cell phones are not meant for distance. That's why when you take a picture of the moon might be a huge object in your eyeballs, but then when you take a photo of it, it's just this little teeny tiny dot. Well, that's because it's the lens. It's not designed. The iPhone and the Android phone are designed for selfies, close-up portrait photos. They're not designed for long-distance photography. But still take a photo, because we can work with that. Like I said, we have it. We have the technology. And then we check the witness statement to the evidence. So this is an example of what Flight Radar 24 looks like. As you can see, there's a lot of skies in the air. Now, Connecticut has, well, let me rephrase that. Before the pandemic, Connecticut's skies were extremely crowded. This used to be at the high point, like in the afternoons and early evenings, there'd be yellow everywhere of planes. And why is that, you might say? It's Connecticut. You know, we have Bradley Airport. Bradley, any of you flown in and out of Bradley, you know, they're busy, but they're not like LaGuardia or JFK or Boston. Why is that? Well, the reason is because we have a lot of airports around us and along the East Coast that are major hubs. And so they transit over our skies. LaGuardia and JFK have a lot of departures along the New York border. If JFK Airlines are going to Asia, they'll go right up the New York, Connecticut border, right over the poles into Asia. Planes going into Boston will usually go on an approach right along the coastline of Connecticut, over like Old Saybrook, Lyme, Groton. They'll swing up into Providence, Rhode Island, and then they'll land into Boston. Planes along the East Coast going over to Europe, like Newark, Philadelphia, Boston, not Boston, Dallas, will go along the East Coast, right up over Connecticut, over Maine, and then once they go over Maine, they'll go over the ocean and then off to Europe. Same thing with JFK. They'll go over Connecticut, right over Hartford, Talon County, up over Boston, up over Maine, off into Europe. And then the vice versa. Planes that are coming into JFK will start to descend and begin going into New York that way as well. Same route. Sometimes they'll go along the coastline. Sometimes they'll go over the ocean. But there are a lot of approaches and departures. Planes that are going to the East Coast from London, Europe, Northern Europe will often come over us and then down our coastline. So there is a lot of air traffic that is transiting Connecticut, not so much landing in Connecticut. And that gets seen by a lot of people. So this is a very, very popular site, and if it's free to use, so I would suggest checking it out. I think it's a fun site. This is planefinder.net, same idea. ATC Live, ham radio operators. You gotta love us because, and I am a ham radio operator, so I am very biased to the ham radio operators. I think we're great because we provide a lot of services. Not only does ham radio operators help with emergency communication, but we like scanners. And one of the things a lot of ham radio operators do is they listen to the air bands. And one great way to do that is they share it. And so far, they're not encrypted like some of the public safety ones are now becoming encrypted, unfortunately. um, you can go to this website and listen to air traffic control. And twice I've done a case with an actual case. I was listening to the air band with a friend of mine, and we heard over in Ellington someone say there was an object in the sky. uh, they were reporting it to Bradley Approach, an object in the sky. They made an official report to Bradley. So I was like, oh, this is great. So I started the investigation. I looked around, I did the investigation, I did the FFA, I got the tower log, I got the FFA investigation report. Long story short, it turned out it was most likely a drone. I mean, that was, or a remote control airplane, I should say, but a drone, airplane, same thing, I suppose. But it was a toy. One of my friends, he was listening to the air bands, again, Bradley Approach, at like 2:30 in the morning on a weekend. I don't remember if it was it was a Friday, because he texted me Saturday. And he was saying that two pilots were talking to over the air-to-air channel saying, is that you over there? And then the other one said, no, but I see you. And then, well, we got a third person up here. And they didn't know what that was. And then it kind of died out after that. But he heard something unusual. And so he kind of followed up on that. It didn't come to much. But my point is that you do hear this. So when we do investigations and it's around an airport, we'll often listen to air traffic control. We'll listen to the approach, departure, the tower frequencies, Boston Center if it's going up to altitude, and the same thing and reverse. We'll listen to the departure if it's leaving. We'll listen to as many air frequencies as we can around the areas, and we might even go into some of the other ones. So if we're listening to Bradley's approach, we might listen to Brannard or Brannard Tower in Hartford, because if the object was around there, maybe they saw it. Broadcastify is another free service, and this also lets you listen to different bands, ham bands, including public safety bands. This is the American Meteorological Society I was telling you about. This is free to access, and it's kind of neat to see because you won't believe how many meteorites actually come and go into our atmosphere on a daily basis. A lot of space debris up there. I mean, if you go on to NASA's, if you just go into Google and type in space debris or a map of space debris, our atmosphere is, our orbit around our planet is just full of space junk. I mean, bolts, rocket parts, all kinds of junk. And when that junk falls into the atmosphere, it burns up. And all of that gets reported here by just people watching the skies. And this is a fun thing to do, because if you want to know what's going on, like what's falling in Connecticut skies, this will tell you for the most part. So I like it. I think it's a fun site. Heavens Above, this is what I told you about earlier. This is a great site if you like it, because if you're a sky watcher or an astronomer and you go out in the evening, if you're looking through the night sky anyway, through binoculars or a telescope, this is free. It doesn't cost you anything to use, but it'll tell you all of the satellites that are going to pass overhead. It'll even give you a map of the directions where to look. So it'll tell you the constellations that you'll see. It'll tell you the direction the satellite will come, and it'll tell you the direction that the satellite will go. Excellent map. I love this, and we use it all the time. And you'll be surprised how many times, and we just closed the case. I shouldn't say how many times, but I'll give you an example. We just had a case a few months ago where one of my field investigators used this site and proved to the witness that what they saw was a Russian Cosmos satellite. It was at the same time, the same direction. So when it was supposed to go up over the horizon was around the time that the witness saw it. Now, you know, you're trying to do this off your memory. So instead of saying like 8 o'clock, maybe say like 8:30 or 8:20, but it was around the general time. The direction was there. The light intensity of the object matched the magnitude of the brightness of the chart here. All of that. So this is one of our very important tools that we use when we're investigating UFOs to try and rule out that what the person saw was a satellite. Now, one of the other ways we do really rule out that's a satellite is our technology so far, and this is starting to change with quadcopters and stuff, is one directional. So it's one directional motion. It's a vector going one way. Satellites are a very tiny little white dot of light, and it just goes right over the sky in a straight line and like an arc pattern, and then it's gone. And sometimes it moves very fast, sometimes it moves very slowly. That's usually a satellite. If you see something that is a very like a white dot and it's zigzagging around, then that's unusual, because given what our current unclassified knowledge is of technology, we can't do that yet. Everything is going in one direction. Whereas, but now with quadcopters, and we're getting a lot of cases like this, they're going all over the place. But quadcopters also have LED lights on them. So they're like blue, they're greens, they're purples, they're all these different colors, or they're white because they have a white light on them and they're flying at night. The thing about quadcopters is so far, they're very low to the ground, about 400 feet. You can legally fly them. You can go a little bit higher with a booster, and if you have a license. The other thing about quadcopters is, you can download an app from the FFA that'll show you the restricted airspace where you can't fly quadcopters high or at all because you're too close to an airport. So if you see a UFO that is doing this this weird zigzagging motion and it's near an airport or something, then you probably is illegally being done by a quadcopter, or it's something else. So those are things we look for. But this will help us rule out satellites. Sat flares, iridium flares, what they are is it's their solar panels. It's a very large satellite. They have solar panels on them, and sometimes when the solar flare, when the light catches the panel, they flash, and then they move on. And people often think that that's a UFO, but it's really just a iridium satellite. And this particular site will track that. Again, the same principles as what I was saying in regards to the other one. This is another star chart of that. So photo analysis, what I was talking about earlier. I won't go into too much of this. This is stuff we'll teach you if you want to be a field investigator. This is what we teach our field investigators. But these are the issues that we look for. One of the biggest things we like about photos is that we'll ask you for the original photo. And why is that? It's because we're pulling the metadata. All of the all the phones today, the smartphones, imprint the timestamp, the f aperture, the ISO of the image, and the Latin longitude. And that is imprinted on the photo. We can pull that off. And when we pull it off, we can match it to when the witness says the object occurred. For example, this has happened to me several times. A witness will say, I'll ask them a couple of times, because remember what I said earlier, we do multiple interviews, that it happened on, let's say, August 31st at 5 o'clock. And then they say, well, and I ask them, well, you have a photo? And they say, well, here's the photo of it. And the photo, I'll ask for the original photo. It'll be like November 4th, 2020 or something. And it's like, well, wait a minute, So that's, again, a red flag. So that's how we try and find out why, get the truth from the fakes. It is very easy to fake an object today, and that's why we have such expensive software to try and counter that. With a little good technology on your end or someone's end, they can fake a pretty good UFO crash or image. So we got a lot of stuff against us, but we are pretty good at finding it. So still send us the photos. This is what I was talking about, metadata. Here's what it will look like. See, it's got the exposure program, the ISO, the date, the data was created. Now, the other great thing about the metadata is they'll tell you if the photo was modified and when it was modified. So if someone tries to crop an image, or if they cut and paste an image onto a photo, it will say it was originally created, and then it will say when the created date was, the create date. The create date is the new image. So if the create date is different from the original image, something happened, the photo was modified. And we can pull that up. So that's very helpful. The metadata can also tell you where the object was filmed. We can put that into a program and say, well, you said this sighting happened in West Hartford, but the image says that it happened in Danbury. Well, what's going on? So we can start looking into why that is. Common misconceptions are lens flares are often given to us as evidence of a UFO, but that's not, that's easily correctable. Sundogs are another common misidentified UFO phenomenon. A reflection, if you look closely, I don't know if you can see it on the zoom here, but up right above the image is like a circular light with little dots of light going around it. That's a reflection from a casino lamp, a lamp in a casino. Here's another one. So this is a reflection of the lights at Bradley Airport. You can see the lights here. This was the image of that terrible accident that happened. Was it last year when the bomber was crashed on the runway? But you can see the UFO images look like UFOs and little orbs in the sky, but they're just reflections of light from the mirror. Physical evidence. So when we actually go to a sighting, what we will do is we will look for physical evidence of a UFOs. EMF, electromagnetic field. Is there one present or was there one present? Was there a residual effect? So this is particularly applicable when we are looking at abduction cases. We will try our best to find that information as quickly as possible, because eventually this will go back to normal background electromagnetic field. But this is something we'll do. We have one of these devices. We'll go in, we'll run it. Radiation, the same thing. Often at abduction cases or UFOs, not often, I should say, occasionally, there has been radiation. So we will look. And we'll teach you how to use these equipment. So if you want to learn how to use this, we'll teach you. If you want to know a little history about it, we'll show you that as well. So this is all part of our investigative process. These are some apps that I like from my iPhone. Sky Safari, excellent program. It's expensive. There are some cheaper ones out there, but it's got a great database. It's very, very good. GeoSat Watch has a great database. They update it often. And I like it. I think it's pretty accurate. Theodolite is a wonderful program that'll give you angle, direction, altitude, speed. We use this when we go in person at our investigations. We'll teach you how to use this. Case dispositions. This is the end. So what do we do? So is it insufficient data if the witness does not respond after 3 attempts? Information only is like, hey, I want to just tell you a story, but I heard this from a friend of mine, and so I'm just going to tell an event that happened. Hoax is just that. Natural phenomenon is something like a man-made or a natural object, unknown other, or UAV. So these are how we close. These are our official case closure categories. Unknown object is some type of aerial vehicle with 90% confidence. Unknown other is like an orbs or floating strange floating objects. IFO, natural phenomena, is man-made or IFO. Insufficient data, information we already talked about. So this is our official forms of how we close our cases. These are our official documents to write it up. Now, any good investigation, and if you're in law enforcement or any kind of investigative field, you have to document what you wrote. And this is how we write it up. Now, all of this we put on our case management system. Every investigator has the same format they use, as you can see here, the same investigative procedure. So there is consistency, consistency, consistency. That is what we strive for. Because remember what I said at the beginning of our lecture. We never close cases. We may close them and move on to another case, but it's never closed. So if I'm, if 20 years from now and another case comes up similar to the case I investigated, and another field investigator goes in and looks at the case logs, this information here is their starting point. This, they can say, well, this investigator, Mike Panicello, did this, 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 and this, okay? And they can follow on. They can follow the investigation. It is detailed, it is accurate. And that's what we strive for, is accuracy in our investigations. So that is my questions. That is my lecture. Now let's go on to questions. I have exactly 15 minutes left, and I kept within my 45-minute time range. So please ask me your questions. I'm here to help. If you are shy and you do not feel comfortable asking questions on Zoom in front of everyone, email me. My email is on the website, MUFON Connecticut. Just shoot me an email. I check the email usually every day, every other day, somewhere around there. So I will be happy to talk to you one-on-one if you prefer that instead of talking on Zoom. But if there are any questions, please let me know. Now we open it up. So Aurelio, do you want to open it up for questions?
Certainly. Folks, I know everyone has to remain muted and no video, but if you want any questions to relay to Michael right now, please just send it to me via chat, and I'll relay the question to Mike. So we're just going to wait. But Mike, we have a question from James.
Okay.
He says, how many nights, I guess, I'm going to ask him to clarify. Please. I would say maybe he's trying to say that how long does an investigation take? Oh, how many nights a week do you do an investigation, Mike?
Well, that's a great question. So we're all volunteers. We all have day jobs. Most of us have families. So I guess we have a life outside of being an investigator. We don't get paid to be MUFON investigators. We do it as a hobby. We do it because we enjoy investigating sightings. So with that background in mind, cases do not take a lot of time. More detailed cases obviously will maybe take a little bit of time, but on average, let's say you make an initial, you get the case on, you get a case, you send out an initial email. What does that take you? Like a few minutes? You type out an email and you can maybe write up a canned response. You send that out, setting up a time to talk to the witness. And then you find a time that works for you both, and and then you talk to the witness for, maybe a half hour, an hour. Sometimes a witness and a field investigator get chatty and they talk for a few hours. It's completely open-ended. But doing the investigations, what I like to do here, I'll speak for myself, because it really varies on how much the investigator has in the way of a case. I mean, some cases are flat and they just kind of fizzle out. Others are really, you can sink your meat into the bone, you can sink your teeth into the meat and really get going on it. And that might take a little bit longer. So it depends on the case. But for me, what I try to do is when I'm working a case, I'll maybe spend like a half hour a day on it, or a half hour every few days. If I'm really busy, it might be an hour maybe once a week. We do have time limits for closing cases. There is time limits for how long you have to respond to a witness and how long a case can be open for. And so there is a time limit. You can't take months to close a case. But as a state director, I am well aware of the fact that people have lives outside of this, that they have responsibilities outside of MUFON. If we all won the lottery and we could just be investigators full time and not have to worry about paying our bills because we have lotto money, then I think we'll all be doing this more than a few hours a day, because it's kind of addicting. But I try to tell my investigators, spend like an hour or so every couple of days just looking at it. It doesn't take long to go through. Once you get the hang of navigating these websites and working these websites that I was telling you about earlier, you can do a few clicks and get your answer. So with Flight Radar 24, for example, if you were going to look for, are there aircraft overhead at the time of the sightings? A few clicks and calculations of the time difference, because Flight Radar 24 works on UTC time, so that's United Standard Time. So you have to go on Greenwich Mean Time. You go, you do the math, you figure out what that time is, you figure out what the UTC time is, you put it in, you put the date in, boom, done. It might take you a little longer at the beginning because you're still learning it. You do a few cases, a few seconds, you're done. You got your answer. No planes, or there were planes. So it varies. But I always tell my investigators, your life comes first, your job comes first, your family comes first, and your health comes first. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think what I'm trying to say is that we do try to, our goal is to get closure for the witnesses, which is why we don't leave the cases open forever. But at the same time, you have to balance that with your other daily responsibilities. So most people that do become field investigators, at least in Connecticut, they do balance the two. So when they have their free time, they do balance that with completing the investigations, with still having a life to go out and enjoy themselves. You're not stuck at your computer investigating cases till 10 o'clock at night or 11 o'clock at night, or you don't have to give up your other hobbies just to be an investigator. You just have to figure out time management that works for you. But I think that's probably the best way I can answer it. I mean, it's finding what works for you, but it's not an overwhelming task.
Thanks, Mike. We have one more question that we can try to do before the time is up, before we begin with our next presentation. One question that we have lots of questions. I'm sorry that we can't get to them. You can always email Mike via the MUFON Connecticut website. But we have a question from Lauren. What is your most memorable investigation that was truly a UAP?
Well, I have a good UAP one, but I have a better abduction case, and I think maybe you guys would get a kick out of that one instead. So, Lauren, it was in Manchester, the UAP case. It was in Manchester, Connecticut, on Main Street. It was a very credible witness. He said he saw a triangle sighting over his head. It moved very slowly. Excellent witness, excellent detail. I think if you were ever going to say you would have a more credible witness, this would be the person. An abduction case I had was just fascinating. It was down in the Greenwich area. It was a witness that he was not the typical person you would think as an abductee, or interested in UFOs, I should say. And he was not, he was as far from the UFO field as possible. He had absolutely no interest in UFOs. He never looked at the subject, never touched the subject. There was so many inconsistencies in his case, though. He had the classic signs of abduction, and I'm running out of time, so I'm giving you the highlights of it. He saw blue light, he saw the gray aliens. He had paralysis of his body. At the same time, there was evidence of man-made effects on him, like he may have been gassed. It was a fascinating case. We left cameras in his room on a hard drive, and we left it there for a week. And the case and the witness swore that he never touched the cameras in that entire week. But our hard drive was completely fried, and we brought it to an engineer, electrical engineer, and we asked him, without any background on it? What do you think might have happened with this? And he showed it to some of his friends. You know, he's a computer nerd at the same time. And he was like, you know, I talked to my friends, and my conclusion is that someone took a high-powered magnet to this. And this witness did not know what a high-powered magnet was. I mean, he was a very great person, but, you know, that was unexplained. So I guess that was probably my most interesting abduction case I've ever had. You know, it was very, very weird. And my most interesting UAP case was the triangle in Manchester. Excellent credibility of the witness, and the description was fantastic. And there's a lot of other evidence in that too, but that's probably it. So real quick, I know I'm probably going to wrap up in a second, but the nice thing about UFO investigations is that, you know, and this is a good segue into that, 90% of the cases you get might be boring. They might be like, I see something in the sky. You can't really investigate it. But if you stick with it long enough, if you do, and this just happened to my newest field investigator. He has a case now that, if it turns out to be a true UFO, is already being talked about on the national level. There's some UFO researchers on the national level that are famous, that are talking about what's happening with this case. Not our case, but the phenomenon that my investigator is investigating. So the UFO sighting matches what's being talked about on the national level. And he has the case, and he's running with it now. So he's excited because here you are in Connecticut, and you found a case that is linked to something national. So if you stay with it long enough, you will get some interesting cases that'll just blow your mind. And you'll be like, I don't know what this is. I truly don't understand what's going on. And that is, I think, what we all live for as ufologists, to find the truth that's out there. And it's really fun to investigate these cases.
Thank you so much, Mike, for
Thank you.
being with us this morning. And be sure to follow Mike on the MUFON Connecticut website, and also his Facebook page. There's a link on the presenter event page on the library. You just click on it, it takes you right to the MUFON Connecticut site. And that's about it. Michael,
remember,
thank you, sir.
If you got any questions, email me. I'll answer your questions.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, man.
Take care. Thank you all.